Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick.
10 to 6, Friday evening. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. Yes means one thing. Buckle up for Simon Mark's American Week.
Tom, the late William Safire of the New York Times styled himself as the guardian of the English language in the United States. And he once argued in On Language, his weekly column, that leadership is what happens when the inconceivable becomes the inevitable. But sometimes in America, the inconceivable is, well, just inconceivable.
Today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
President Trump, speaking at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday, suddenly accusing Ukraine and its President Volodymyr Zelensky of starting the war that, in fact, we all know was started by Vladimir Putin. He had not invited Ukraine's courageous and heroic wartime leader to talks in Saudi Arabia. Those were reserved only for the Americans and the Russians. And the president intimated on Tuesday that Zelensky might have to hold an election in Ukraine if he ever wants to qualify for a seat at the table, where Trump says he plans to carve up Ukrainian territory, hand chunks of it over to the Kremlin, deny Kyiv membership of NATO, and give Vladimir Putin pretty much everything he has ever craved.
Wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election? That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
That is a bald-faced lie. Only Russia argues Zelensky is illegitimate. Trump claimed the Ukrainian leader enjoys an approval rating of just 4%. In fact, it's 57%. And demanding that Zelensky hold an election now in the middle of a war would be like insisting that if Churchill wanted to join Roosevelt and Stalin at the Yalta Peace Conference that created the post-war settlement in 1945, then he really needed to hold an election in the UK just to prove he had the backing of its people. Tell you what, let's just stipulate now to the fact that is as clear as the nose on your face. Trump, for reasons we may never entirely understand, favours Russia, parrots all of Putin's talking points, and is now willing to shred his relationship with his NATO allies in order to benefit the Kremlin.
Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
By Wednesday night, Trump was upping the ante even further, lying again about Zelensky and trying to shake him down for cash.
We had a deal based on rare earth and things, but they broke that deal. But they broke it 2 days ago. We had a deal because I said, we're spending $350 billion and Europe gets their money back in the form of a loan and we don't.
Again, there was no deal between Zelensky and the US, but what Trump officials did try to do last weekend, in a move redolent of the mafia, was force Zelensky to sign a piece of paper handing 50% of Ukraine's rare earth deposits, extremely valuable minerals like lithium, over to the US to pay America back for the wartime assistance it has provided. Zelensky had never seen the document before, and being a sensible fellow, he told the Americans to stuff it, which infuriated Trump, according to the president's national security advisor, Mike Waltz.
Look, President Trump is obviously very frustrated right now with President Zelensky, the fact that he hasn't been willing to take this opportunity that we have offered.
Angering the White House further, Zelensky's entirely accurate claim that Trump is living in a disinformation space. And indeed he is. Sometimes he says America's given the Ukrainians $350 billion. Other times he claims the number is $500 billion. The real figure is actually just over $100 billion. But disinformation is now driving policy here, where every single top government official is a Trump quisling. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, until recently a fervent Putin critic, questioned here by Caitlin Collins of CNN.
You wrote in an op-ed in the fall of 2023 that, quote, Putin is to blame. Do you still feel that way now, or do you share the president's assessment as he says Ukraine is to blame for the start of this war?
Well, it shouldn't surprise you that I share the president's assessment on all kinds of issues.
And indeed, it does not surprise me. A government of yes men and the occasional yes woman bending over backwards to embrace the president's lies, even when they risk laying waste to the transatlantic relationship between Washington and Europe that has kept the peace for 8 decades. French President Emmanuel Macron will be here on Monday. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer follows on Thursday for the most consequential meetings between European leaders and any US president since 1945. Both Starmer and Macron must confront a sudden new reality. America looks like an adversary of Europe, seeking to rob Ukraine of its mineral wealth, but hoping to deliver respectability to a war criminal in the Kremlin who has stifled free speech, rigged elections, murdered his opponents, and may yet unleash his army on the Baltic states. Trump is even suggesting Putin should be allowed back into the G7.
I'd love to have him back. I think it was a mistake to throw him out. I said, what are you doing? You guys, all you talk about is Russia, and they should be sitting at the table. I think Putin would love to be back.
And in Washington today, whatever Mr. Putin wants, Mr. Putin gets. 1 month into President Trump's second term, the frenzy of activity here kicked up a notch. Thousands of federal workers being fired. Today it's the turn of the Internal Revenue Service, America's version of HMRC, and the Pentagon to brace for thousands of dismissals. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, which of course is not a real government department, proved this week not even to be a model of efficiency. They managed to fire hundreds of employees at the National Nuclear Security Administration. You might think the name might have given them pause for thought, but they only realised belatedly that they had put the country's nuclear safety at risk and scrambled to find the workers they had just laid off. They then did exactly the same at the US Department of Agriculture, by mistake firing scores of specialists who were trying to protect the country from the bird flu epidemic, which, by the way, forced the price of a dozen eggs here up over $8 for the first time this week, twice what you're paying in the UK. And the pace of activity and the inability of judges to find out what legal standing Musk has to engage in his battle against fraud and waste is leaving lawsuits in abeyance at a time when the traditional independence of the Department of Justice has already been shredded.
He's become one of your best friends. He's working for free for you.
Well, I love the president. I just want to be clear about that. I think President Trump is a good man.
This guy's he's a brilliant guy. He's a great guy.
Musk and Trump sitting alongside one another for a Fox News interview with Sean Hannity this week. The president insisting that his de facto prime minister is under control.
I mean, I haven't asked the president for anything ever.
And if it comes up, how will you handle it?
Well,
He won't be involved.
yeah, I'll recuse myself if it is.
If there's a conflict, he won't be involved.
But that is already demonstrably untrue. Musk's companies hold more than $15 billion in government contracts. The New York Times found that Musk's actions at 11 separate government departments and agencies have tangibly benefited his corporate empire. And President Trump himself is no stranger to conflict of interest. First Lady Melania Trump is in the middle of producing a $40 million documentary for Jeff Bezos's Amazon, looking into her fascinating life and times. The Wall Street Journal found that corporate America has directed at least $80 million to members of the Trump family and the Trump Presidential Library in the last month alone. And that's before we get to his cryptocurrency winnings.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
Last night at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, the richest man in the world, who has plunged hundreds of thousands of federal government workers and their families into unemployment and crisis, charged around the stage wearing sunglasses and brandishing a chainsaw. America's de facto prime minister behaving deeply erratically as he works for a president who this week declared that he who saves his country violates no law. Also last night, the president's political Svengali, Steve Bannon, indicating that Trump, 1 month into his second term, has no plan to give up power.
The future of MAGA is Donald J. Trump. We want Trump in 28. A man like Trump comes along only once or twice in a country's history, right? We want Trump. We want Trump. We want Trump.
He is not joking, neither are they. Monday was the President's Day holiday here, which did see thousands of people in cities all over the country take to the streets and voice opposition to everything that Trump is doing. The most sanguine commentary of the week came from left-wing Democrat Senator Bernie Sanders. He told CNN that if Americans are expecting Democratic Party leaders who have disappeared from view over the last month to save them, they are mistaken.
The struggle against Trump, the struggle against authoritarianism, that is not going to be won here in Capitol Hill. It's going to be won by millions of people all over this country standing up and saying, you know what, we fought and died for democracy. We're not going to move toward authoritarianism.
But authoritarianism is not America's future, it is the country's present. A nation captured by Trump, his family, the high priests of tech, simultaneously bankrolling the president, enriching themselves, and now casting Europe to the winds. And into this mad, malevolent gyre, Tom, Sir Keir Starmer walks next week.
From Washington, D.C., Simon Marks, American Week.